Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either ShaynaJamesCoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm your host, Shayna James, and I'm excited to be here today to talk about staying healthy in stressful and uncertain times. And currently being in the midst of the COVID-19, what would you call it? Some part of me wants to call it insanity or, the crisis that we're in. This is applicable for now, but it's also applicable for all times in our lives. There's a lot of stress and uncertainty that happens on a collective level. There's a lot of stress and uncertainty that happens on a personal level. So I'm really excited to have Russell Jaffe, MD, PhD, and CCN here with us today. You have a lot of history and experience and wisdom, and I'll give you a little bit more of an introduction. But first of all, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yes. So a little bit about Dr. Jaffe. For the last 30 years, he's advocated a system that treats people, not diagnoses, cause, not consequence, and promotes long-term sustainable solutions as an alternative to a system dominated by prescriptive, symptom-suppressive solutions. Dr. Jaffe's cumulative experiences enable him to take his efforts a step further and build PERC, did I say that right?
Mm-hmm.
Integrative Health, a company that offers the world scientifically proven integrative health solutions that speed the transition from sick care to healthful caring. And, I could read your list of what you've done in the world and your education, your, more than 40 years of experience contributing to molecular biology and clinical diagnostics and functional predictive testing, procedures designed to improve precision of diagnosis. I mean, you have written more than 100 articles on the subject. You have your MD, your PhD from the Boston University School of Medicine. There's so much that you've done. And, for listeners, you can read more on Dr. Jaffe's website. But thank you again. And let's dive into helping people understand how to really stay healthy right now.
Well, thank you for that introduction. My mom in heaven especially appreciates when people say things like that about me. And yes, I was incredibly fortunate, not that I earned it, but I was really fortunate to get into a 6-year medical program at Boston University and go through internal medicine training there, and then matriculate to the Public Health Service, where at the National Institutes of Health, I became doubly board certified in laboratory medicine, and each year I was in government service.
Wow.
We introduced a fundamental new method that became the standard, most of them still the standard, because we need sensitivity. That is, if you have the problem, the test should detect it. Mm-hmm. We need specificity. That is, if you don't have the problem, the test should be negative.
Mm-hmm.
And then we know how predictive, what's called the predictive index, which is the product of the two. And I'm not going to make people into biochemists or into mathematics majors, but I can explain, because I think I understand my work and how it relates to this challenging 21st century.
Yeah.
To anyone who's willing to listen.
Nice.
And I will have a minimum of equations, I promise, and I'll have a minimum number of footnotes. But as you correctly said, if people want more details, they're welcome to come to any of our websites.
Yes.
And
Well,
drink.
Yeah, and part of what I really appreciate about you is that you were trained in this academic way, and that you are now advocating for a much more holistic way of looking at health. And I'm wondering, where do you want to start? Do you want to talk about your foundations of advocating for nature, nurture, and wholeness, or is there something that people need to hear before that to really understand it?
No, thank you. I think the place to begin is that I came with all my academic biases and whatever, ribbons and credentials I had accumulated. And I went to debunk first acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine, TCM.
You went to try to debunk them.
Oh, absolutely. I came as a skeptic. I came to find the flaw for a very simple reason. I had now 12,000 hours of post-college training, and not one word about the value of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, etc. And in Washington, D.C., there was a fellow named Qing Nuan Wu, and I went as a skeptic, and I did a 7-year apprenticeship with him, and then I taught the first program that was accepted for medical licensure.
Quite a change from skeptic to a 7-year program.
Well, I went to his clinic to prove him wrong. He barely spoke at all to me. He just said, watch. And I saw him with his needles and his pulse diagnosis do things that we at the clinical center of NIH couldn't do.
Wow. Like what?
Got my attention. Oh, like what? This is a very specific example, but it's just an example. Mm-hmm. A person seen by 6 different institutes of NIH because of intractable pain that included migraine headaches and fibromyalgia pain and intractable muscle pain, which is really fibromyalgia, and other pain. And in 2 20-minute treatments, the person almost leapt off the table to hug Qing because they were out of pain.
Wow.
I said, what did you do? He said, did you watch? So it takes a while to learn pulse diagnosis. It takes a while to understand the gestalt within which traditional Oriental medicine and other systems like Japanese Kampo medicine or like Ayurveda, which I went to debunk after that. And I found Dr. Rama Murthy Mishra, who wrote the textbook of yoga psychology and commentary on Patanjali Sutras. And I started as his student, and I ended up as his doctor.
Wow.
Now, being the student is a privilege. You sit at their feet, you soak in their wisdom.
Yes.
But at some point, everybody needs a doctor. And let me see, I'm a doctor. So I could make that transition. And then I met a Cambodian Buddhist monk, Bhante Dharmawara, who was first among equals in my mentorship. And he had decoded, he had revealed a non-invasive color healing system that Gautama Buddha had articulated 2,500 years ago. That was practiced for 500 years and then lost for 2,000 years. And Bhante Dharmawara figured it out.
What is a color healing system?
Well, this is a color healing system that uses light, like dichromatic light. It uses sun to influence the quality of water and oil stored in certain glass, green, amber, or blue, for certain periods of time, and then taken orally.
Wow.
And it includes mindfulness meditation, where you might meditate on the color green. And here I mean spring green to summer green. It's like forest bathing. In Japan, there's a whole activity of just walking under the canopy of green trees in a mature woods, and that's supposed to be able to evoke your healing responses.
We've come so far from that.
I didn't say that it wasn't a big lift. I'm saying that I went to him and he was gracious enough to take me on as his student. And we had 30 years, more or less 30 years together. From his age of 80 until his 110 passing.
Oh my goodness.
And he had highest frequent flyer status on 3 different airlines when he passed.
My gosh.
Mhm.
I really love people like you because
Well, thank you. We
I
like to
love,
be lovable, by the way.
yeah,
That
I
that
love,
doesn't mean that doesn't mean I go home with everyone that I love or loves me,
no, no,
but
no,
we
no, no,
like to be lovable. We
no.
like to have a heartfelt connection. And yes,
Yes,
we have a head and it's connected to our body and our heart,
exactly.
but there's something beyond logic and what I would call reductionist medicine,
Yeah,
logical medicine. There's something beyond that.
yeah.
Like in logical medicine, how do you quantify love? How do you quantify empathy? How do you quantify internal adaptation to stress?
Mm,
And that gets us back to today's question, because these are stressful times.
yes. Yes. So what can you say for people who are forever I never like to say everyone, but I would say to some degree everyone is in a stressful situation right now, whether it's being home with their family or being isolated or being with their kids and trying to homeschool and work and all the same time, or having people who have health issues themselves or their families. What on the ground can you help people understand about health, that the medical practitioners aren't really talking about?
Well, as a medical practitioner, I am trained to make a diagnosis and write a prescriptive or interventional solution.
Yeah.
As a health promotion advocate, now I want to know what you eat and drink, what
Mm-hmm.
you think and do.
Mm-hmm.
How I understand that we all have external stresses. I want to know what your internal adaptation is to those stresses.
I like
Can
that.
you stay calm at the center of the storm while everyone around you is near hysterical, which
Yeah.
right today could qualify for most people,
Yeah.
because they don't have either the clarity that comes from a whole bunch of earning certain degrees and covering certain knowledge bases. But more importantly, I have two 30-something children who have survived their parents. And I'm glad to tell you that it is possible to raise a healthy child even in these times. And
Yeah.
more importantly, if you're an adult, to be childlike without being childish,
Mm.
to be able to nurture yourself without being narcissistic,
Mm-hmm.
and to know what your nature is by testing. Could be self-tests, could be predictive biomarkers, could be a whole bunch of physiologic, not pathology-oriented testing.
Yeah.
So I started as an internist and laboratory pathologist, but today I would say I choose physiology before pharmacology.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody's listening to this, what should they be tracking and checking on to be more healthy? I mean, one of the things you just talked about was mindfulness. I find that very important, right? I've realized through my own spiritual practice and my own physical experience that the physicality and emotionality, all of that, like it's not separate.
No, we're
But
quite in agreement on that. The mind and body are always connected.
yes.
You can live by the river denial, but I don't suggest it.
So as a
So
proactive health advocate, right? I like that. Like instead of talking about, people going and necessarily going into the hospital system or into the medical system, which is, it's necessary at times, but what can people be doing at home right now?
well, let's start with the choices about what you eat, drink, think, and do. So,
Great.
are you eating the foods that you can digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden? And how do you start? Well, with 4 self-assessments.
Great.
These are things that are very inexpensive, but very predictive of your degree of healthfulness or risk. For example, your digestive transit time. How many hours does it take from the time you eat food until it comes out the other end?
Mm-hmm.
It should be 12 to 18 hours. That's the healthy zone. That's what we advocate. But the average digestive transit time in America is somewhere between 4 and 7 days.
Oh, wow.
So you could be, oh, wow is right. So you could be regular. That is, you go to the bathroom and sit on the commode every day and something comes out. But did it come in last night? Or
right. How do you know that?
By your digestive transit time.
Hmm.
And you know your digestive transit time because in the instructions it says take at the time that you choose, swallow these charcoal capsules with some water and mark the time. And when the black crumbly stuff comes out of your tush, mark the time. And the difference is your digestive transit time. So, for example, when I have roast beets at night, in the morning, in the commode, it's red.
It's red, yeah.
And after all these years, I will tell you the first thought I have is never, I had beets last night.
It's always like,
oh my God, is that blood?
Yeah.
It's red.
That happens for me.
It came out of my tush. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not different than anyone else. It's just that I can explain what's going on and hopefully encourage people to take constructive action.
Yes.
So we recommend charcoal-based transit time.
Yeah.
And we have a little kit that we've put together for those who want to do that self-test. The next self-test is hydration.
Uh-huh.
What is the specific gravity of your urine in the morning after rest? If it's too concentrated, you're dehydrated.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you that almost everyone who is unwell
is dehydrated.
Somewhat dehydrated.
Mm-hmm.
So you can measure it in the way the self-test, or you can drink enough water and herbal beverages so that you urinate every 2 hours while awake.
Yeah.
And I do tend to slow down on the water intake after about 7 or 8 at night because I don't mind getting up once at night, but I don't want to get up 6 times at night.
No.
So hydration is the second self-test.
Okay.
The third self-test. What is your urine acid alkaline pH? What is the amount of mineral or extra acid as reflected after 6 or more hours of rest in your urine?
Mm-hmm.
And the last is the C cleanse. How much of nature's vitamin C, the C cleanse, how much of nature's vitamin C, fully buffered, fully reduced L-ascorbate, how much of nature's vitamin C does it take for you to have a cleanse or a flush? And we originally called this the C flush. But I will tell you casually that more people will do the C cleanse than the C flush, even though it's the same thing.
And what do you mean by a flush or a cleanse? How would you know?
Well, what we mean is you take every 15 minutes a certain amount of this natural vitamin C until you have like an enema from within. This is not just loose stool. This is not the bowel tolerance technique of old from Bob Cathcart.
Yeah.
This is a rethinking of it so that you ramp up quickly and you flush out toxins and extra fluid and feel better.
Interesting.
Now, a healthy person, because we had self-reports of something over 4,000 people before we started talking about this, and if you are a healthy person, you would cleanse on 4 grams of vitamin C or less. If you had minimal symptoms, it would be 5 to 10 grams. If you were a typical person with some symptoms, it would be 10 to 100 grams. 100 grams is 100,000 milligrams. Do the math. Now, there are actually a few % of people that need more than that.
Oh my God.
Why? Because of oxidative burden and toxicity from the environment.
Wow.
So we are marinating in a sea of toxins. The question is how much comes into you and how fast can you get it out, or does it bioaccumulate as it does in most people?
Yeah.
And the 20th centuries or the 19th century were times of opportunity, and you didn't need what I'm recommending in the 19th century. This is the 21st century.
Yeah.
And therefore, we need to be more proactive. We need to learn more about ourselves. We need to learn how to breathe better so our lungs are stronger. We need to do a certain amount of cardio and weight-bearing exercise so that our heart does not attack us, to quote the 2,000-year-old man Mel Brooks. And know that we are doing what is sufficient to renew us.
Yes.
I've forgotten who has the phrase "use it or lose it." It's a company that sells stuff.
Yeah, I can't.
It's a great phrase, because if you use your muscles and your brain, if you use your lungs and your heart, they will renew themselves, which is really quite remarkable. And if you don't, if you just think about it, if you just sit on the couch and watch other people exercise, that could be interesting depending on who's doing the exercise, but that won't help you.
Part of what I really appreciate about this is I grew up in a suburban East Coast town where there, supplements weren't a part of my life, and even exercise. I exercised. I was on sports teams when I was younger, but exercise itself wasn't made a big deal. Like now in my life, I've had many, many health issues. And so I've, done acupuncture and Ayurveda and all kinds of digestive processes. And so I really get the importance of this. And I also have this skeptical East Coaster living inside of me that says, well, how could all this be so important? Because nobody ever taught it to me. So, maybe I'm just making this up. But then I listen to you and the other part of me, and I think, no, it's all so important.
Very important. I have a number of friends who also were skeptical. Some of them are now in the world's smallest private practice, because I do have a few people that I directly take care of, but I've never sent a bill as a doctor, and no, I'm not looking for patients. But I do train doctors, and I do train systems. And I did help found the American Holistic Medical Association, and I believe I was the only main speaker on the first and last meetings of the American Holistic Medical Association. Wow. So yes, there have been a group of physicians interested in the whole person for a very long time, but it was such a small group, and it was mostly clinical practitioners, not researchers. Mm-hmm. Because if you want to be a researcher, you probably need someone else's support, because I didn't come with a trust fund. Yeah. And if you need research support, you have to go where that money flows. And it flows right now to diagnosis, to symptom treatment. It goes to placebo-controlled trials or even multivariable trials. And yes, I have done in the community outcome studies. We have the most successful outcome study in type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, fibromyalgia, muscle pain. We have many anecdotal cases that we can share to show people that it's relevant for them to be proactive, not reactive. Yeah. And this takes nothing away from any of my more conventional colleagues. Yeah. They do, within, for me, a more narrow frame, often very well, but within a narrow frame, that happens to ignore mind and body, happens to ignore the environment and relationship, happens to ignore low-level toxins that can be synergistic as oxidative burdens and anti-nutrients. And I do my best at this point through the PIH Academy to train doctors who really want to be more effective.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for doing that. I really appreciate that. So, okay, let's go to nature, nurture, and wholeness. How do you support people to integrate those?
Well, let's talk about them, because they're three simple words. Nature means eating foods that are organic or biodynamic and whole. Mm-hmm. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. I mean, if you look at the healthiest populations all over the world, the Greek Mediterranean diet that Artemis Simopoulos has written very intelligently about over many years, or a traditional Japanese diet, and there are many different diets, but they all have three things in common. First of all, no edible oils. Second of all, 20% of calories from protein, 20% of calories from fat, whole food protein and whole food fat, and 60% from chewable, fiber-rich whole foods. What do you mean? How do you cook? Well, we cook with water, we cook with broth, we cook with wine, we cook in a tagine, which actually uses the moisture of the food, and you don't need to add extra water. And we don't have edible oils in our kitchen.
Interesting.
Because edible oils, to one degree or another, all have additives, preservatives, suppressants of rancidity. There's a lot of technical issues. The bottom line is kind of simple. Inside the seed or the nut or the food where the fat is, it's protected. And as soon as you separate the components, as soon as you have the edible oil separate from the whole food, trouble begins. Yes. And a colleague of mine asked me just this morning, what about extra virgin olive oil? Well, let me let you in on a secret, and you can confirm this online. Only 2% of what is sold in the world as extra virgin olive oil actually qualifies as extra virgin olive oil.
Right. I've seen those studies.
Oh, no, this is something I'm just reporting about. This is not work we did. But I will tell you that once the family and I were in Tuscany, and it was time for the olive harvest, and we went to the Oleandro overnight, and they pressed the olives into this dark, green, viscous, extra virgin olive oil, and they drizzled it on bread, and they toasted it in the fire of the oven, and it was delicious with a little sea salt. And I said, where can I buy this? And they laughed. They said, we don't make enough of this to sell. This is what keeps us young and happy.
Uh-huh.
Good luck. And in the morning, there was a mountain of oil mash outside, and this big truck called Bertolli came by and picked up the spent olive mash and went away. And I said, what does that mean? And they said, well, when Bertolli processes that first, they're going to call that extra virgin olive oil. Ha ha.
Right. Right.
So eat seeds and nuts. Eat salads that are naked. You don't need salad dressing if you put in edible flowers or herbs and spices and other things that make the salad more interesting. There's only so much rabbit food you can eat. But I have very interesting salads, often as the main course. And then we might have some root vegetables that we have baked. We might have other things that we have made in our Whole Foods kitchen.
Yes.
And yes, we have a pressure cooker and a slow cooker. And yes, we have a rice maker that makes the perfect rice because it does it under pressure. How do they do it?
As I just roasted my root vegetables this morning in, olive oil. And I've been thinking about oils a lot lately. And my Ayurvedic practitioner has said, right, not to use these oils. And so good information to have.
The wisdom traditions, like you're describing, the Ayurveda wisdom traditions, are worth paying attention to. And then if you're like me, you verify. So I trust the traditions, but now I verify them.
Yeah. Okay. What about nurture?
Nurture means what's going on inside. Nurture has to do with, do you get touched in a way that is nurturing? For example, Roger Toll is nice enough to come by and for the last 30 years has been doing Traeger sessions with me and then mentored my son, Sky. And Dean Juhan, who wrote 2 books, The Spiritual Aspects of Body Work and Job's Body. Remember Job in the Bible? He suffered. And most people physically suffer because they accumulate repair deficits and then they ache and they don't get restorative sleep. And they're grumpy because they don't feel good, but they don't know why.
Yes.
And now we can know why. With non-invasive tests, whether it be post-diagnosis and TCM and acupuncture or an Ayurveda practitioner that you trust and who brings their experience to your particular situation, or similar whole person practitioners, I care less about the diagnosis. In fact, I often say to people, I'm not sure what the diagnosis is. And then they breathe a sigh of relief because the diagnosis was stressful.
Right. That's a scary part to hear.
So I often say to them, I'm not quite sure that the diagnosis is right. Why don't we go by results and evoke your healing response?
Evoke your healing response. I love that.
Because there is a healing response inside each of us. And when we trust the practitioner and put into practice what we intend, we evoke our healing responses. And yes, you can diminish that by calling it a placebo effect, but I'm telling you, it is the human healing response, and it is very powerful.
Wow. Beautiful. Okay, and how about wholeness?
Well, wholeness is both a philosophy and a practice. Wholeness means I'm going to do those things that make the world around me more whole. And just to explain that a little bit more, what I mean is, if you practice healthier habits, the people around you get healthier. And if you practice what I will call afflictive habits, the people around you get sicker.
Yeah.
We don't know why that is, but there's a lot of studies that confirm what's called the spreading phenomenon in civil society. So if only because you want the people you love and care about to get better, if not because you care enough about yourself to put yourself, not always first, but to make sure that you do get what you might need.
Wow.
I happen to need a lot of quiet time. So did Carl Jung.
Yeah.
You can criticize both of us for that, but we did better in quiet time.
Yes.
On the other hand, we also like to be with others, be out and interact with others. And I understand social distancing at times of pandemics, and I understand that quite well.
Yeah.
However, I can practice social distancing and still interact with people at a heartfelt level.
Yes, for sure.
You can't do body work or play basketball without contact, at least not that I know of.
Yeah.
However, there are times when we really need to nod towards each other and acknowledge the quality of the other person,
Yes.
the so-called God within each of us, if that's okay, while we are nurturing ourselves and surrounding ourselves with wholeness and nature. So here we have 250 edible plants in less than a half an acre.
Wow.
And my job is to help the gardeners, but mostly to watch the pollinators and enjoy the show and take a picture of whatever is that day at a peak. And my son pointed out, and I was skeptical, but he turned out to be right. He said, in this kind of a garden, every day a new flower blooms.
Wow.
And when the flower blooms, the pollinators come.
Uh-huh.
Well, I grew up as an urban fellow in upstate New York. I went to Boston and then Bethesda, and actually intended to stay in academic medicine forever.
Mm-hmm.
However, my life is much richer. I think the quality of my life and health is much better.
Yeah.
My ability to mentor others or to be a decent parent or child of someone else is definitely better because I enjoy every breath. I am grateful when I get up. I'm of an age where just getting up, you have to be grateful for. But if you get up and you feel good, you should be doubly grateful.
Yeah.
So gratitude is important.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I can feel my system rewiring itself and taking in some new pieces and some pieces that I've heard, but we need to hear things again and again. And
very important point.
Yeah.
I didn't get this in 20 minutes. I doubt that even your listeners will get it all in 20 minutes.
Right.
But please dig in to what we're talking about, because there are reliable resources that can help guide you, mentor you, and help you live well in the 21st century.
Yes. Beautiful. And all right, what do you want to leave people with?
I think the most important thing that I can share is that this 21st century is radically different. We are marinating in seas of toxins and distress. Therefore, we have to up our game in regard to what we eat and drink and what we think and do.
Yeah.
And it's not just, you could be perfect on eating and be a couch potato.
Yeah.
And there's still going to be problems. So if you balance out wholeness, nature, and choosing life, shall I say.
Yeah.
Hillel, the elder 2,000 years ago, contemporary of Jesus, said, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? If I'm only for myself, what am I? If not now, when will you choose life?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel there's like a lightening that's happening in my body as I hear you talk about this kind of health, and that we do have more power, I think, than we realize to create health, even though it's not given to us, in the cultural dialogue. So thank you for bringing it.
A pleasure to share.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to ShanaJamesCoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to ShanaJamesCoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.